Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about Paperbacks from Hell. This is a book written by Grady, Hendrix, and Will Errickson, or with Will Errickson, and I'll talk a bit about both. I've been eyeing this book for such a long time and I never picked it up because I thought it was going to be just kind of your standard coffee table book with just a lot of artwork. I didn't think much of it, and then recently I've been picking up a lot of books that interested me, whether it was about vampires or weird kind of speculative, supernatural cult kind of books. And I noticed that they kind of have this running thread, which is mostly being paperbacks from hell, which is a term kind of coined by this book, but it's mainly referring to this boom of the horror genre in the 70s and 80s specifically. And it goes a bit deeper than just a book about that time period. I was very impressed with the way this book was written, but what I've learned about it and around it since. So one of my friends from BookTube, Nick, from the Book Graveyard, made a few videos recently about his collection of paperbacks from hell, but he also had a live stream where he interviewed Will Errickson, one of the contributors to this book. And Will has an incredible collection of paperbacks from hell as well, and he's very knowledgeable. He has a blog. I will link all of those things and more down below if you're interested. But one of the things that all of these videos and media attracted is just this huge community. It opened up my world to how many people are interested in this kind of stuff. And then I went to this new Toronto bookstore. Now it is new-ish, and I have to mention that because I didn't talk about it in my video last year about bookstores in Toronto worth visiting. And had I known about it back then, I would have definitely incorporated it because it's one of the cutest and coziest and retro kind of bookstore. And it has mostly new books, though it has a used book section as well. But it's got this kind of 70s, 80s, 90s horror vibes. So it has new publications at the front, decorations everywhere. It has all kinds of horror books or nonfiction books you would have seen on my Death Shelf videos. It has an entire wall of Goosebumps books. And on a separate wall, there was also this selection of paperbacks from hell. So this being at the center of the shelf. And then around it were all these newer reprints of paperbacks from hell. Valancourt Books reprinted a lot of these books that were mentioned in this book, and they all have this kind of tab now that says paperbacks from hell, and these are newer, so they're not the authentic ones. This way these books are still very accessible to people, and it's a way to avoid, just going to estate sales all the time hoping to find one, though it is still fun to do that because that's part of the hunt of being a book collector. And it's always interesting when you find weird books in weird places. But if you definitely want to read a paperback from hell, there is a reprint, so there is a way to access these without going on eBay or some obscure website where only some people might have it. With all of these things in my life coming together, I thought it was time to finally open this book and read it. As always, I follow along with the audiobook. It keeps me in the zone, it keeps me connected. And while this is a very beautiful and artistic book, because it includes a lot of covers. So I'm gonna film it down here. So I'm flipping through this book right now, and you can see all of the high quality photos and all of the book covers. And there's a lot of appreciation for this artwork. And the artists are mentioned, some of them by name, some of them with a bit of background. Sometimes the book cover artist is more impressive than the author and the content itself. And that makes it part of the lore. It's very much a part of paperbacks from hell. The allure of these covers and the artistry that goes into it is very much a part of what makes this book interesting. But what impressed me the most was the way this book really dives into readerships. It really assesses the way that people kind of, either in communities or alone by accident and then finding other people like them, collectively sort of are drawn to a certain topic while there's something happening in the media. For example, there's a chapter on children in horror or babies and creepy kind of weirdness springing out of children and babies being the horror element or the center of the narrative. And we find out that this is out of the fear of the new technology that is birth control and the pill, but also IVF and IUDs and all kinds of birth control being popularized, but also forms of making babies from scratch in vitro. And then this having kind of fears in the news, and then those fears were then absorbed by these authors and spat back out to the audience in these horror novels. Sometimes you would have, the real estate thing. So then there's houses that are haunted and things found in houses. Then there was a book that came out called The Rats by James Herbert, and that did so well with the rats eating people and you being on the menu. And then people saw the popularity of that book and went, what about dogs? What about cats? What about moths? What about slugs? What about crabs? So then this whole cluster of animal horror books came out. Most all of these things come in waves, but they're also a reflection of what is happening politically or culturally. And I keep reiterating this because I think it's important, but I don't think people realize sometimes how big and well populated the United States is or are. Basically, you have China and India at the top, but then the third place is the United States. It's a huge population, and it has a huge cultural impact on the rest of the world through its media, specifically television and literature. And I think we don't realize just how big of an effect these paperbacks from hell had at the time. Another chapter in here is kind of the rise of the occult and how you would have cults in general be more popular in the news and finding out sort of, drinking the Kool-Aid people, and then this kind of being in the mainstream media, people being afraid, novels coming out featuring cults, the occult, Satan, but all in a very new way, in a way involving more of the general population, in a way that earlier Gothic novels wouldn't have. Though there is a chapter here on the Gothic and its influence, and that was also fascinating. There's also a chapter here on women writers like V.C. Andrews and her book Flowers in the Attic, and what a huge impact that had. And then there's also funny moments like people being inspired by Dungeons and Dragons or being inspired by a hoax in the news, and how the hoax itself would have created a fear, and then books were written about that fake story and made it somewhat even more kind of urban legend. Is it real? Is it not? Just because it was so dominant in mainstream media. I had such an amazing week with this book. It was fun, it was interesting, and again, if you're interested in readerships and communities, I think this is such a great book. And at the end of it, if you're anything like me, you will walk out of this book pretty much with a really long TBR, because I have flagged so many of these books. I want to read so many of them. You saw me hold this earlier. This was a new acquisition from that bookstore that got my attention. And because of Nick's interview with Will Errickson, I was made aware of a short story anthology called The Rack. And there's stories in there very inspired by Paperbacks from Hell. I'm really interested in picking that up, but I just thought I'd draw it to your attention in this video if this is something of interest to you. So yeah, all of the things I've mentioned will be linked down below. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you in a future video very soon. Bye!